Hey all, this is Ed here, community lead at Persona, and this is Personally, our community podcast. Today I'm talking to Steve Craig, and Steve has a pretty interesting story. He came from the IDV world, he was working with big companies, he decided to build his own business, and now he's educating the market around IDV. It's pretty interesting to see his stories and how we think about IDV in general. We had a really good conversation about IDV and KYC in different scenarios that's not fintech or edtech. He's talking a lot about marketplaces and even a burger case. So stay tuned. So I hope you liked this episode. We're here, we're live. So Steve, tell me a little bit about yourself. I mean, who is Steve?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me on this episode, Ed. I'm Steve Craig. I'm founder and chief enablement officer at Peak IDV. And many people ask me, well, what is a chief enablement officer? Well, technically on paper, I am CEO for the company, but my role in this business, I feel, is to really help enable the entire market from providers to practitioners to really understand digital identity. So for me, you asked who I am. I'm passionate about this space. I've been in the industry about 8 years. And for the last, I'd say 20, I've been in financial tech and internet technologies. So I'm really excited to work with companies like Persona to be able to make identity better.
That's awesome, man. Thanks for that, and thanks for being here. I've been following you for a while. I mean, we spoke like a couple of months ago, and it's just great to see Peak IDV, peaking and starting to really make an impact. It's really, really nice to see that.
Starting to climb up the mountain, yeah.
Right. Yeah, man. Well done. Well done. I mean, big kudos. I mean, it's tough. It's tough. And you're actually in a market that you mentioned something really important is like enablement is probably one of the roles you have within the Peak IDV. I think being an evangelist for the whole thing is huge, right? Because I think a lot of companies think that IDV is really like, are you in fintech or compliance? That's the only thing where IDV care is important. But I know you really advocate for more than that. I'd love to hear your perspective on like IDV as a whole. I mean, you've been working in many industries and with different types of companies. Want to share a little bit about like your perspective on this?
Yeah, digital identity has been really a regulatory requirement for many years. So financial service companies, fintech companies, there's a law in many countries that requires these companies to know their customers, so KYC, and that extends into requirements around anti-money laundering. Just about all the countries in the world have some regulation around that. But when you think about other industries that perhaps don't have a regulatory requirement, they still can benefit from strong know your customer processes to prevent fraud, to make trust in their environment, to make a better experience overall for all of those that are participating in it. So what I've found over the last few years is there's much more interest and there's this convergence in the use of identity verification technologies with learnings from financial services into marketplaces and platforms and e-commerce. And now we're seeing an explosion with the social networks. It feels like Meta and with their Facebook and Instagram, and most recently with LinkedIn, they're all starting to realize, hey, we need to have trusted identities in our ecosystem.
This is such an important point. I think you touched a good point there on more than just the compliance side, but the trust. And when we talk about social networks, there's probably like the counter of that is like they want to grow as fast as possible. Let's go all in this thing because if we look big, it's going to be great. And I think it's past that stage where now it's like, okay, we want to make sure that we're information is trustworthy, so getting rid of like fake news, but also members are trustworthy, like so there's no like fake accounts. I know Twitter is probably like a side thing, but other than that, we're seeing a lot of that. We actually had a recently Coffee Meets Bagel, which is a dating app using Persona to verify identity of members, and I think it clearly alludes to like, okay, we want to make sure we want to build this trustworthy environment for people. And you have to probably do that a lot with your customers, people who are like in the B2B space. How is that? I mean, what's that journey like? When do they think I need to have a solution for me that for my KYC needs? Do you actually help them navigate that? And how is that?
Yeah. So with Peak IDV, I focus on really three types of companies. The first are providers. I work with a lot of companies that provide these solutions. And in my role as Chief Enablement Officer, I help the go-to-market teams within those companies to better understand their buyers and their customers. So to use the know your customer, but this time know your client, really. So I support those journeys. I also am working more and more with the practitioners that use these technologies that are dealing with a lot of noise. There's a lot of different companies out there. There's a lot of mixed marketing messages. There's a lot of ways to solve the problem. And sometimes that can be challenging to know which type of solution And then a smaller audience is investors in the community who want to participate in the growth of the space. Sometimes they're looking at seed investments. Other times it might be Series A or Series B. And I'm helping them to understand the differentiation. So each of those constituents all influence this market and how it grows. But it's really important that they each be educated in their role and educated in how they can contribute. And I feel when we're all doing identity the right way, we all benefit. And to answer your first question, these companies that are maybe not in the regulatory space where they're not required to do a KYC, a lot of times they have really big growth goals. Growth has been the most important thing the last few years. It started to shift more into profitability. But when you're in a mode of growth at all costs, you perhaps look the other way on the scrutiny you would apply to accounts coming in. So you may decide not to have, you want to minimize friction. You're spending a lot of money to get attention. You want those customers to get in, but it's later that perhaps there's fraud damage or abuse in the system that can be caused. So I find in this new era, I think Mark Zuckerberg calls it the year of efficiency, where companies are looking at profitability and they want to make the right decisions. And now that starts with companies really having robust identity verification and optimizing it where they can and achieving peak performance, which is a play on words for my company name.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I mean, speaking about education, I think that's a big thing for you because you've been creating a lot of cohorts, training members of companies that are providing identity verification. What are challenges that you see that they have that you help them with, and what are the types of who is the persona that comes in? I mean, with no pun intended here, but who's the person that comes in, to look for this kind of capacitation to learn and be educated around how can I sell, like how can I provide solutions in this space?
Sure. So I've been fortunate to work at 3 of the top providers in digital identity. It's what got me acquainted with the space and got me really passionate about it. And when I left the most recent one and I entered this period of free agency where I was on my own and I could talk to really anybody now, it wasn't confined to a specific company or a set of customers. I went to trade shows. I went out to the market. I went on LinkedIn and forged new connections like the one that we've established, Ed. And I asked questions about what are the pain points? What are the challenges? On the provider side, a lot of times the biggest issue is just keeping up with market dynamics, understanding the change and understanding what's happening outside of the virtual 4 walls of their environment. A lot of us, as we work in companies, we're communicating internally in Slack. When we do speak with customers, it's in very limited windows. So we very quickly can lose sight and have almost like a tunnel vision to what we're doing. So I attempt to open the aperture within companies on competitive signals, alternative signals, dynamics that are occurring in fraud, the impact of things that you see in the media like ChatGPT or generative media. What does that really mean for the business? And how do you connect those pieces? So a lot of what I've done in my training and my cohorts and my one-to-one engagements is helping to connect dots and expand this field of the things that you don't know that you don't know.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes a ton of sense. And I'd love to hear more about Peak IDV because this is probably one of the core pillars that you cover is the training, the educational piece. But tell me more about Peak IDV. What else are you building up? I know you have like a series of podcasts as well that you recently launched. Is it connected? And tell me more about the business overall.
I would love to. Thank you for asking. So Peak IDV has a couple pillars. The first pillar is something I call Academy, and I'm wearing this shirt. I don't know if you could see the Academy shirt. And this is the way I describe it to people is if you've heard of masterclass.com, where you can go on and you can learn from experts in their field. Well, I'm building with the Academy a masterclass.com for the digital identity space. I just so happen to be the first one that's in it, but over time, I'd like to bring experts from different companies, from practitioners, from heads of compliance to teach courses on things that they know really well. And so the Academy is evolving and it's going to get bigger and bigger with the type of content and the type of people on it. The second piece of it is something I call insights. And this is just having a pulse on the market, understanding how it's changing, new regulations coming in, the ways companies are changing their positioning, investment, all of the things that you'd have to spend hours sitting on LinkedIn or doing web searches, curating that and informing education from that process. The third pillar is an expert network. So through the build out of courses and education and the people I connect with, I would like to have those individuals be assets to the providers and the practitioners and the investors that want to go into places deeper than I could go. Right? I have a lot of expertise, but sometimes I'm limited in certain areas and I want to augment that with the expert network. So each of these pieces come together in what I call a market hub. And this market hub is part community, part education, part resource. But as digital identity grows and changes, the market hub and Peak IDV will grow and change.
That's nice. That's great. And when you talk about, like, it's great that you have this. And I think you mentioned something really interesting, because you're covering like that market need that prior to, when you were working for a company, you had to be limited to that specific provider, where now you're like, you've unleashed the Steve Craig, like you're doing everything now. You can touch every area with no concern. And you're probably learning so much about what challenges they have, plus what are the different use cases that maybe certain companies can cater for, and you become that yourself, like, become that asset. And as you mentioned, as you grow and like you scale Steve to be more like, a masterclass.com, where multiple experts will join in and start to educate people, you're probably going to build like this wealth of knowledge around the IDV, which I feel it's not well explored just yet. I think it's quite limited to the providers. Maybe there's something big in it. I'm just like following you a lot, so I'm seeing a lot of really good stuff that you're building there. I think there's an interesting perspective on that, because IDV is core to a lot that's being done today, but not everyone realizes that until after the fact. I think marketplaces, ed techs, dating apps, marketplaces could be, I'm not sure if it's fair to say, but a dating app is a marketplace of humans. But it is, right? You have to build a relationship of trust there. You have to know that people there are real people, and whoever they say they are. So I think it's a big market, man. Do you plan to expand Peak IDV to do something else beyond the educational piece and this network?
Yes, I do. And the company right now is called Peak IDV. And a lot of my experience has been derived from identity verification. But if you think about the concept of identity and you mind map it into other categories, it easily branches into fraud prevention and fraud detection, biometrics and authentication. There's a whole world emerging around Web3 and self-sovereign identity and decentralized identity. And then you can connect that to all that's going on in AI and generative media. So there is this web of interconnectedness. And when I think about identity, I think about the saying in the 90s, when every company is going to be an internet company. And sure enough, every company has a website. And then mobile came, and every company is going to have a mobile strategy, and they're going to have a mobile app. And that's mostly true. Now it's AI. Every company's going to have an AI strategy, and AI is going to be an important part of it. Well, every company needs an identity strategy as well. And as AI advances and the ability to create deep fakes and to create autonomous entities and to create reflections of you, that you might have an AI, a personal AI that goes out in the world and works on your behalf, it becomes really important to know the authenticity of information, the authenticity and the origin of actions. And that is the identity layer. And many companies have identity schemes for when you think like identity and access management, managing credentials. But real identity and pseudo identities are going to be really important to just how we do business in the multiple layers of existence that we'll have across digital and virtual. And it's been less talked about recently, but the metaverse that Meta was onto for a little while, that's probably a few years away, but there's still this world of interconnectedness, which I think generative media is going to fuel that metaverse for Meta in the future.
That's such a good point. And it's crazy that, when we talk about like Web3 and metaverse, there's maybe this is the old man talking now, but there's this feeling that a lot of people want to remain anonymous, and there's a lot of avatars joining in this world of Web3. And I think we've seen a lot of that during the pandemic, when a lot of companies in Web3 just boomed and started. And I think everyone was like, let's try something out. We're at home, so let's build something. And it has, grown to a crazy point when we suddenly realized that not all these companies are solving real problems, and then they start to fade. But with metaverse as well, like you're creating like this second character that's supposed to be you, but maybe it's not you. Do you see IDV, KYC playing a role there? And have you, I don't know, seeing anything interesting in that world of, I don't know, even like how would IDV, match with this world of metaverse and the second character, second version of you?
Yeah. Well, I've seen some of that in the news just recently. When I think about the large gaming platforms, video gaming, where there are virtual currencies that can be exchanged. There's real money that can be made in items that are sold, or for a period of time last year, it was selling land within different metaverses. that's all fun and games until real money comes out. And then with real money becomes real problems with respect to money laundering and dealing with fraud loss and people's accounts getting hacked and account takeovers. And that's where companies realize to manage these situations at scale, they need to have identity infrastructure, one, to know their customer from the beginning, but when they also have situations of, hey, this my account was stolen, how do you then prove it's you to regain that access? So I think we'll have those different layers. And your point about anonymity, what is really powerful about what's coming in identity is we've lived in this world where it's all or nothing. Typically, you can be completely anonymous, or you could overshare. And then when you get into situations where companies just want to have the driver's license and the selfie biometric and all the other details, people are wary to that as well. And so when we move to a world where you have more control of your identity and you can decide the levels, like, do I need to share my full name and my date of birth, or do I just need to assert that I'm over 18 or over 21? Then you get more flexibility, more control. And I think that's going to open up the possibilities where people realize, okay, well, now I'm not oversharing. I can maintain my privacy. I can retain some level of anonymity, but I'm allowing the company to comply with their age restricted content or with a government regulation on opening a bank account.
Yeah, that makes sense. There's something that I'm thinking, like, I mean, the more you speak about it, the more I'm thinking, are we missing out? Maybe is there like an industry that's missing out on IDV, that they're like not exploring it to its full potential yet? I'm thinking out loud because I was talking to Christina, that you might know. She used to be a chief compliance, and she's a fantastic person. She's also in the persona community, and she mentioned the DSI, which is decentralized science. I was like, this is fascinating because I mean, all the research, all the work that's being done can be done, has been shared amongst scientists and all of that, but not
Mm-hmm.
in the to say the Web3 version of it, of like a
Yeah.
DeSci. But then there's a little concern around veracity and like how much can we trust about that information? Is it like
Mm-hmm.
a real scientist? Is this being just thrown there to get people to throw them off? And I see like KYC being important there as well. Do you see any other industries that are probably missing out and not exploring much of the potential that we can get with IDV and KYC?
I don't have as much experience on the, you called it DSI, decentralized science.
DeSci, yeah, yeah.
DSI, I haven't heard that term before, but coming out of the pandemic, one industry that has really awakened to the need for identity is healthcare. And we saw problems that emerged for that period of time when we were looking to prove vaccination records, when companies had more restrictions on whether you had to have a vaccine or not. And some of that was travel and going to other countries. But it really highlighted the gaps in healthcare in terms of proving your identity to enroll. And there's, of course, a lot of protections around healthcare information and the portability of that. But that was a gap. And then along with that, there were a lot of voices either on the side of vaccines or not on the side of vaccines, and not to get political, but they were voices that didn't necessarily have the corroborated credentials. And so they were making claims, but then how did you then map back that person is really who they claim to be? And then how do you then follow that path to, do they have that education? Did they really work there? And when you think even about the LinkedIn comment earlier, anyone can go and set up a LinkedIn profile, amass thousands of connections, and then just change your history to whatever school you wanted to go to or whatever company you work at. And it's just been this last year that LinkedIn has gotten more aggressive on government issued ID process. I just went through that for the first time last week. And if you go to my profile now, you'll see I've got a government ID verified. But I've been on the platform since 2007. It's taken a lot of time to get to that level. So I think that there are more and more industries that go, hey, we need to make sure that we have the origin of this information correct, and that this person is credentialed. It's to start really who they claim to be. And we can go down the path around the blue check marks and Twitter and Meta and all of the ramifications of that. And there's a lot of debate there. So I think we'll see more as companies are trying to figure out how to do it cost effectively, but also in a way that is privacy preserving, and a way that there's minimal friction to, because if it's really tough for a person to do, they'll just drop out of the process, and that defeats the purpose of it.
That makes a ton of sense. And I think you're right. I mean, I have a feeling that a lot of countries are way ahead on this. For example, if you're looking for a place to stay, like a house, in a lot of these platforms in the US, you have a verification process there, where in Europe, a lot of the countries don't. So you essentially could just create a fake account, say that you're looking for a place, and then get into someone's house, which is very strange and I wouldn't
Yeah.
say even that dangerous. But yeah, so I mean, there's probably more exploration even within other countries, to learn from whoever is ahead that's preventing fraud, preventing, building more trust, building a better network and better marketplaces and whatnot. It's great to see that. And I know, like, I mean, talking about fraud. I recently saw a post from you on LinkedIn. By the way, you're up in your game there a lot on LinkedIn, so congrats on that. By the way, I'm gonna leave your LinkedIn profile here so people can follow you. You recently shared like the burger story, and that was quite interesting because that's completely off the fintech and edtech world. It's like fraud in people getting free burgers, the students getting free burgers. Wouldn't mind sharing that?
Of course, and thanks for highlighting that LinkedIn growth. It's something new that I've been focused on, just producing more content in smaller chunks to share education. Right? And a lot of these insights I share in my courses, but providing smaller chunks of it to reach a wider audience. So that particular story came from a time when I was a product manager for a company providing services to fast food companies around mobile apps. And we launched what was pretty much a first of its kind for the burger industry, a loyalty program that by joining gave you a free burger. And we thought, wow, that's a great incentive, and that should get people excited to join. And it's a benefit to introduce this program. And we started with one market, but what we found pretty quickly is we didn't want to have friction. We didn't want to have a bunch of extra steps to create the account. It was immediately getting abused. And in that post, it happened to be groups of high schoolers that had learned. And at that time, they were probably sharing through Facebook or Twitter or whatever means, maybe in the cafeteria, like, hey, if you download this app and you put anything in there as the email, you get this coupon code and you go right to the restaurant and you get free food. And then the next day you could do it again, or you could turn around and go outside and do another account and come and get another one. And there was nothing preventing that because the thought was minimal friction, maximum growth in the program. But then when we realized that that was a challenge, and it came from, fortunately, this physical digital scenario where the people that worked in the restaurants, they could see it. They could see the actual same people going over and over again. We incrementally added more. We added an email verification and eventually a phone, one-time password, SMS verification. And none of that stopped the abuse because they were just half-measure steps until we instituted more of a minimum purchase, which required the individual to have more skin in the game. And that was enough friction for it to subside. And probably there were still people abusing it, but it was no longer a giant problem. And that was fast food. That was prior to a lot of the fintech boom. And I see this today in financial services with new account openings. I see it in gaming and gambling and video gaming, where if there is anonymity, you can create hundreds of you. And fraudsters learn to do this, and then they scam at scale, and they turn those sometimes into external money-making opportunities. But us as practitioners, us as providers in the space, being able to recognize the schemes is often hard if you don't think like a fraudster. And so the end lesson of that is when you're building any program, where's the gap? Like, where's the free burger in this? How would someone use this system to abuse it? And then what can you do to prevent that and balance the risk and the user experience?
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting. It reminds me when I worked for Dropbox, and remember, like at the beginning when they grew super fast through the virality of that referrals people could get. So if you refer someone, you get extra free space in your account. It was free. Space was not a commodity back then. It was a rare thing. So getting your 500 megabytes was a big thing. I think it was probably 50 megabytes at the time. It was really like not that crazy. But people start to really, really use that, and then it got beyond the just excitement to the abuse, right? And I remember this guy in Brazil who created a script for his email. So he would create like, I don't know, like say Steve +1 at peakidv.com, then Steve plus, yeah. And then just like the plus, because on Gmail, people don't know if you put the plus, it ignores what's after the plus. So you can create as many tests as you want. And he was just generating like this random numbers and creating like fake accounts on his Gmail or whatever account it was, and then signing up to Dropbox. And he would get like tons of like gigabytes of free space because of the referrals of himself. And that was like crazy abusement. And he started to sell that service to other people. So other people like, give me your email and password. I'll do the same for you and generate like this gazillion emails and accounts for you on Dropbox and get your account to just boost to like a gazillion megabytes. And back to your point, if you add friction there, like maybe there's a a counterpoint to that. They maybe wanted the
Hmm.
hyper growth, to get to the millions and millions, but then is that at which point does that still make sense, right? Because you want to make sure
Yeah.
like these are accounts that we will want at some point to convert or maybe be active accounts, and if they're just like there to give you the free space, it's not necessarily the main goal. I think it has changed a lot. I think more
Hmm.
recently, I don't think we're seeing that kind of like this hacks to grow that much. I think companies are being more thoughtful about that, which is great. But yeah, it's just interesting to hear that because it reminds the old days of growth through like extreme hacks.
Well, there's still sometimes a conflict of interest for companies where they want to grow and they want to show great growth numbers, and we've seen this, not to bring Twitter up again, or even some of the dating sites where there are fake profiles and bots, and some of the engagements driven by those interactions, and companies historically could turn a blind eye to it because it helps with if they're a public company, it helps with the numbers. If they're trying to create a incentive for people to join, if the network looks larger from those accounts, is okay, well, maybe that's okay. And I've heard stories where companies actually were the ones creating the fake profiles in the ecosystem. There was a big story recently about a fintech company that was acquired by a large bank, that after they acquired, they found out the majority of the accounts were just made up by that team through different synthetic means, and they didn't realize until they started emailing those people, and all the emails were bouncing because they didn't exist. And so you goes
Oh,
back to like this, the credibility of these accounts, and mapping back those to real humans. And if you're doing loyalty rewards, you want to prevent abuse. You don't want to make it so hard that people won't join, but realize fraud will find a way. It's like spilled water. It will find the crevices and the gaps, and it will get through there. And so you just have a constant gardening that you do as technology advances, as people get savvy with the measures you put in place. It is a
yeah.
continuous battle in some cases.
Man, totally, totally. And now you're saying this. I mean, I'm thinking there will be someone at some point that will say, I'm going to create this true fan social network. So everyone will go through a KYC. There will be friction, but if people go through that and still follow you and you get like millions of followers, this is huge. This is legit.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm yet to see that. I think it's high risk, but it's still like something that could be very interesting. Where like this is the genuine like community or genuine like social network where people are for reals people. They're not
Yeah.
just a bunch of bots or people with multiple accounts or this fake likes, fake whatever follows. This could be super interesting. I think there's
Yeah.
a big market there.
That's what excites me about the potential for social media with Web3 in this transition of ownership, because the predominant business models that we see out today are advertising based. So you want massive growth, and you want to create engagement, and you want to connect advertisers with people, and you get them to download or sign up for accounts. And so you, in those environments, kind of the user, but you're also the product. When you shift to a world in which it's decentralized, and perhaps there are alternate business models, maybe there are some token economics, or maybe you just have to pay. If you pay a subscription fee to be a part of this, then you remove the need to have advertising. You then shift the conflict of interest that arises with turning the users into the product, and then you can promote the environment in a different way. And one of the recent developments that I'm following is the interest around a company called Blue Sky, which is looking like a decentralized next generation Twitter that is still in invite only mode, but thinking about how you can have ownership of that account, and how you corroborate that it's really you through your username or your handle against a domain name, which has some protections. It'd be interesting how that evolves. And we're already seeing that with the Web3 wallets to access NFTs or crypto accounts. Like MetaMask actually has a huge number of identities that are more anonymous, but associated with that Chrome browser plugin. So there's a lot of opportunity to rethink how that's done, and put the power back into the hands of us as individuals.
Man, totally. Oh my God, give me an idea. I'll pitch that to the product team here at Persona. What if you do your Chrome tab, KYC your Chrome? So essentially, like you are you, and then whenever you go to a website, it knows it's you, and you kind of have you avoid that friction of logging in. because it's your identity. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah,
I think, yeah.
that's a great. I use Chrome now for. I have a personal Google account. I have a business Google account. I have some others, and so each Chrome profile can be associated with different login experiences. So I mean, there's certainly power to that. One of the other trends I'm seeing in the space is the move towards what is often called a one-click KYC, where you have a company that is building a reusable identity for the purposes of simplifying the experience. So they're not necessarily coming at it from a, hey, let's change the world, which is, there's a lot of potential to do that, but it's more, why do I have to go to 10 different websites and fill out the same form and present the same ID? Like, can I just simplify that? And if you can appeal to the end user and you can save them time, you can create the incentive. If it's just technology for the sake of technology, I don't think end user behaviors are going to change. They really need to have a compelling reason why they would take those extra steps and do that. And that's one of the ways is to simplify it.
And it's kind of like, in a way, Apple's Face ID, right? Kind of skip through all that process of logging in with recognition, facial recognition. It could be like an evolution of that, something else. And it's great, yeah. I mean, I think there's so much that we can go through and deep dive in this, because I'm getting super fascinated about like the world of IDV. I think when we first met, I was learning a lot about this, and you actually were super helpful. I think you have a lot of courses on your website, and you have one that's free. I believe it's still free for people to take. I hope it is still free. Or maybe like give you like a free. If it's not, I hope it will have like this back live again. But it was great for me to learn, because I was getting started with Persona and didn't know much about the world of KYC, KYB, and any of that. We had our internal training, but getting someone else's perspective was really good, because it was additional value for me. So big kudos to that.
Yeah, thank you. And certainly there is a free preview course available if you want to see the style of how I present some of these topics. That can be found by going to academy.peakidv.com, and that is a learning platform, and you can see some of the other courses there. There are paid on-demand courses. I also do cohort courses. I actually have a really big cohort coming up in June, which is designed for marketplaces and platforms, the practitioners of these solutions, to learn about the different ways to verify the identities of their members within their organization and how to think about optimization. So that's going to be a live session, and I'm launching that at Marketplace Risk. And then you mentioned earlier, I do have a podcast. The podcast executive series is where I focus on the journeys of entrepreneurs, CEOs, change makers, thought leaders in the space, to go a little bit deeper into their backstories and how they arrived into the identity problem and what they focus on. And that's another easy way to learn. So let's say you don't want to do a full-on course. You can find my podcast on the audio podcast platforms. You can go to the executiveseries.peakidv.com and watch the videos just like this one, and learn from the people who are making it happen, the things that how they think about these problems. And I've had just a few so far, but I have more that I'm building out in the backlog, and I want to have great conversations with leaders in the space. So that's another opportunity if you're watching this, if you'd like to be on the executive series, if you're a change maker, or thought leader, or a entrepreneur in IDV or digital identity, come speak with me about that.
That's great, man. I will for sure. I'll leave the links like for everyone to follow and keep like, understanding and learning more from your work, which is great. I want to thank you again for the time, Steve. I know you're probably super busy, because when you build a business, I know it can be not only challenging, but very busy, because you have to do and juggle between a lot of different things. So thank you for taking the time and being here. Make sure I'll leave all the links below. Thanks for being part of our community as well on Persona. And I mean, keeping spreading the IDV world and educating the market about what's, the importance of it, and really appreciate the work that you're doing. And I learned from you a lot. So thanks for that.
Absolutely. And thank you for inviting me to this, Ed. It's great to chat with you. And I hope people will get value from this conversation and continue to learn and grow in the space.
Thanks, man. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much. And that's a wrap. And if you like this episode, join us in our community with persona.com/community. You can connect with people like Steve, and we're there for you. We want to help you, support you with your business, support you with needs that you have, questions you have about KYC, IDV. There's experts there. But not only that, if you want to try Persona, you can use it for free. You can be part of our startup community group, and we're going to be there for you. We're going to help with your implementation, questions you have. We're going to connect with people from a similar industry. Pretty good to be there. I mean, it's a win-win. I hope you're excited, and we'll see you there.